For years, Peterbot has had so many cheating accusations that he was nicknamed Cheaterbot.
Something is not adding up with his gameplay.
The dude's cheating his off, bro.
So he's tracking these guys through walls, man, like...
But he just went on to have the best year in competitive history, placing second, first, and first in the 3 FNCS majors, but this only made the cheating accusations worse.
For me, the most notable piece of damning evidence against Peterbot is that he is an FNCS winner, but he won from his house.
Now there's like a million videos covering Peterbot's backstory, so I'm just going to speedrun it so we can actually get to the interesting stuff, because you probably know the rest of it already. Started as a console player, switched to PC, keyboard and mouse, and pretty much instantly got incredibly good just by playing a lot of zone wars and box fights. That then converted really well into trio FNCS in Chapter 2. He won his first FNCS with Bila in Chapter 3, but Bila was like too scared to go to LAN or something, so Peterbot had to fill with Jamper and they sucked. He struggled to get a consistent teammate for most of the Chapter 4 after that in 2023, where he ended up playing with pretty much a different player every season, before eventually going back to globals with Bila again. They placed 26, which is pretty bad. So now you're basically caught up on all of the elements of his backstory, outside of one important one, which is the cheating accusations. During this time, there were a lot of clips of Peterbot that looked sus. Now, I'll be honest, most of these can be pretty easily explained by having one of the best players in the world constantly live and showing his gameplay, and for the most part, some strange things are just bound to happen. This is particularly true when most of the clips come through the laggy spectator system, where the player was knocked and they end up watching Peterbot. Now, these claims led to video after video of players calling out Peterbot for cheating, with one in particular, I'm not gonna lie, it's so funny, I just had to show it.
What's it do there?
Oh, that looked like a little bit of a lock on. Yeah, so let's pull it back. Yeah, looked like he accidentally locked onto the guy there.
Huh?
That guy jumped up and his aim jumped up with him. He's on keyboard and mouse and should have absolutely zero aim assist, but for some reason he does.
Now, the main problem with content like this, other than the fact that obviously you're just dragging other people's names through the mud for your own views and money, is that it just creates a genuinely horrible and negative reputation around players when most people have no evidence to the claims that they're making. For years, Peterbot has been nicknamed Cheaterbot, with a huge amount of the general Fortnite audience hating him. Any discussion around him will naturally lead to players dismissing him as a cheater, and don't even get me started on TikTok comments, please. My brain cannot handle them. Funniest of all, anyone who actively attempted to be critical and take a deep dive into these clips, like this video from K-Dog, which is really good, were basically just called a glazer in the comments. It didn't help that the 2 LANs that Peterbot had attended, the Invitational in 2022 and the Global Championships in 2023, he had stunk them up. But in his defense, the 2 players he played with, which was Jamper in 2022 and then Bila in 2023, pretty much quit the game very soon after this, so it seemed like they were towards the end of their career anyway. So I understand how people come to the conclusion that Peterbot is cheating. There's a lot of small signs pointing towards that, but he's very much so overhated. But 2024 would change all of that and see the rise of Repeaterbot. I made that up, yes, it's great. And the greatest run in Fortnite history. After struggling to find a consistent teammate in 2023, Peterbot would finally find the perfect duo, Poyo. Now, what was interesting about this duo is that it doesn't really make much sense on the surface. Most teams are made up of one IGL, an in-game leader who makes the calls and is generally the brains of the team, and one fragger who shoots people and often does not have much in the brain department. Now, these aren't hard set roles, and most of the time the best teams have an IGL who can frag and a fragger who can IGL. But both Peterbot and Poyo historically have just been fraggers. In the past, these teams have not been so good, mainly due to the brain thing. But Peterbot and Poyo, simply put, are different. Peterbot is an insanely mechanical fighter, the best in the world when it comes to tournaments. No matter the format or tournament, Peterbot is always at the top of the elims and damage leaderboards. Poyo is not an insanely mechanical fighter, but he's just incredibly consistent, similar to Thomas HD. He doesn't miss an edit, he doesn't miss a shot, he always makes good peaks, but most importantly, he is always reliable. So teams with 2 fraggers often don't work. So how have they gone on to dominate 2024 in a way that we have never seen before? Aura. I wish I was joking. I wish I was, trust me. Their first FNCS run in Season 1 of 2024 was incredible. Out of all of the FNCS rounds, their worst placement was 6th, and they finished off the season with a 2nd in the Grand Finals. Not only this, they were a rare team who fully tried in every single tournament they possibly could, only placing outside of the top 7 in 1 of the 5 duo cash cups. Most people forget the season for them since they just didn't win the FNCS, but this started the race for the 40 bomb solo cash cup game, where at different points, Peterbot and Poyo both had the world record elims. No matter the tournament, Peterbot and Poyo were on top, but their biggest season was of course Season 2, where they decided to land at Grim Gate, a decision that would set up their entire year for success. In Season 1, they landed at Ship It Station, where they could play for Forecast. Now, knowing they're one of the best teams in the lobby, it was a no-brainer to play for the Forecast Tower, as they'd just be able to win the fight against any teams who wanted to contest for it, and the advantage of being able to see one zone ahead was always worth the risk of taking a fight, in particular when you'd probably win that fight 9 times out of 10. But in Season 2, landing at Grim Gate gave them access to the Cerberus Medallion, which gave them infinite dashes, and the Cerberus Shotgun, which is the most powerful shotgun in the season. Now, historically, mythic drop spots actually haven't really been that good. It sounds wrong, I understand. You're going to say, how has Stark Season not been the best drop spot of all time? But in high-level competitive tournaments such as Grand Finals, these drop spots just attract too many people to contest, so even if you win off spawn, this usually takes far too much time, and it ruins the start of your game, and of course, you also just run the risk of dying off spawn. But Grim Gate was a little bit different here. Anyone who contested them lost. In scrims, cash cups, or FNCS qualifiers, it literally did not matter. Not only did they win off spawn, they won everything. Every off spawn, every fight, every match, and every tournament. They won all 4 of the dual cash cups in Season 2, with one of them winning 6 out of these 6 games. And of course, they won their FNCS Grand Finals together, landing at Grim Gate. I already have a full video on this, so I'm not going to go too much in detail on it. For 2 seasons in a row, Peterbot and Poyle have been on top of every single leaderboard, and their reputation as an unbeatable duo was starting to spread. After having such a dominant season and proving that they were literally unbeatable off spawn, they could do pretty much anything and choose any drop spot they wanted going into Season 3, and they decided to choose Redline Rig. This gave them access to the best assault rifle in the game and the Machinist's Medallion, which constantly gave them infinitely recharging shield. This meant that they could trade damage with other teams and easily put themselves above the Storm Surge threshold, and no one else could do that because they didn't have infinitely recharging shields anymore. This was a massive advantage in their early and mid games, and it's no surprise that they managed to win their 2nd FNCS in a row. Now, outside of Grand Finals, they weren't really able to replicate their success of Season 2, where they won every single cash cup, as this time they had a little bit more inconsistent results. But it's really funny that people were saying they fell off because they didn't win every single tournament, which just shows how high their peak was this year. And you know, they got that aura apparently. So coming into Season 4, there was no online FNCS, as this season held the FNCS Global Championship, the biggest event of the year, held on LAN, where Peterbot had to play on a PC that was not his. Due to their unbelievable dominance across 2024, his reputation as Cheaterbot only grew stronger, so he knew he'd have to finally prove himself on LAN. Throughout the entire year, they've been coached by Razaru, who played a huge part in their success. Together, they all cooked up a crazy game plan that combined all of the different strategies that they've used throughout the year. Just like the last 2 seasons, Peterbot and Poyle decided to land at the best drop spot on the map, the Raft. Here, again, they could access the best loot in the game, the Emma Frost's Mythic Burst AR and the Emma Frost Reveal Medallion. The medallion highlights any player nearby every 50 seconds, which is insanely overpowered to have literal wall hacks during the game. Now, the Hood kind of calls this ironic, because the player nicknamed Cheaterbot is using a wall hack medallion. Anyway, immediately after looting, they then rotated south to the Forecast Tower, similar to what they did in Season 1, which allowed them to see always one zone ahead. Then they went for the bunker if the zone wasn't max distance, which gives them insane loot and the ability to modify their weapons, and then finally they'd go back to Loot Island, which gives them even more loot and the ability to harvest full materials, which was a massive part of their strategy in Season 3. Most importantly, the fact that they had Forecast and the Loot Island meant that they could just stay in Storm and use the launch pad on top of the island combined with Flowberry Fizz, or the rift below at a very specific time. Just before the 6th zone appeared, if they used either of these, they would be high into the sky when the 6th zone appeared, so they would know exactly where to land. But since they have Forecast, they can see one zone ahead, so they would know exactly where 7th zone was, so they could just essentially rotate from the 4th zone when the Loot Island spawns, all the way to the 7th zone with max materials, skipping so many rotates, which obviously gives them a massive advantage over everyone else. Now, the Global Championship was a 2-day event, with 6 games on each day, and in all 6 of the games, how did they get all of this uncontested every single time? Well, no team fought for them off spawn at the Raft, as there was enough space for 3 teams to land here and play their matches out. Sure, Emma Frost Medallion and Burst AR are powerful, but the contesting teams were already making it off spawn alive and doing reasonably well, and Peterbot and Poyle have proven all year long that they would win almost every single fight off spawn if needed, so no team was brave enough or stupid enough to try to fight for this loot. So what about the Forecast Tower? How did they get this for free? Well, all season long, Clix and Vino have been landing at Sandy Steps and fighting Peterbot and Poyle for this Forecast Tower. However, in the Global Championship, they were contested off spawn, which slowed their early game down a ton. Given there was a launch pad right next to Peterbot and Poyle, who could always guarantee they got up to the Forecast faster than Clix and Vino, they have a wall hack coin, and they have way better loot and materials, it was almost impossible for Clix and Veno to get up there early enough to actually be able to claim it. So on day 1, they were able to claim the forecast tower completely for free in all 4 of the games that it spawned. Now, because holding the medallion shows your location on the map, players knew roughly where Peterbot and Poyo were at all times and how to stay away from them. So in the 3 games they went for the bunker, no one else did. And in the 4 games they went for the island, unsurprisingly, no one else did either. They were literally Thanos on day 1. They had the best assault rifle, a wall hack medallion, the ability to see one zone ahead, a free bunker if needed for extra loot and to modify their weapons, and Loot Island for free rotations into the 7th zone and a place to re-harvest. And the reason they managed to get all of this uncontested is because they have tryharded every single tournament all year and showed almost 0 weaknesses and have truly built up a reputation of being unbeatable. They managed to win 2 of the 6 games on day 1 and ended up with 442 points, which was 147 points ahead of Queasy and Thomas in 2nd place. Now at the time, I was streaming, watching the event, and I wasn't even excited for day 2, I'm not gonna lie. Peterbot and Poyo had such a solid strategy and setup, I thought it was just unbreakable, and honestly, they were just so good that it made the tournament a little bit boring. However, they showed a lot of cracks on day 2, which made this tournament much more interesting. Between days 1 and 2, teams usually change up their strategies as they learn what the teams around them are doing in the first day. So if, for example, a team on day 1 keeps fighting you in a very specific location and a very specific timing, you can just plan around that and create a counter strategy, and that's exactly what happened to Peterbot and Poyo. Now you see, most of day 1, while they were on Forecast Hill, they could look to the south to damage Clix and Veno and Demo and Resigns, and they could look to the southeast as Giras and Chari were there, so they had plenty of opportunities to rack up Storm Surge damage. However, coming into day 2, because teams often, don't like getting farmed for Storm Surge damage, Clix and Veno pushed to the west to fight the Brazilian team there, whereas Resigns and Demo quickly rotated east. On top of this, Giras and Chari, who would usually be on the hill to farm Surge on these players, also instantly rotated to their east and went to grab a different hill near the middle of the map. So this pretty much left no one around for Peterbot and Poyo to shoot, and since Storm Surge damages players who deal the least damage, they were immediately in trouble. Worst of all, the zone was a max distance northeast zone and they're in the southwest, and because they spent all of their time getting the forecast tower and not getting any damage, this resulted in them getting stuck at the edge of zone behind tons of other players. Their shields and materials were constantly stripped away as they got farmed for damage by all the other teams in front of them. Now usually they could just go up to Loot Island and refarm their materials here, but they needed Storm Surge damage, so they were forced to go up and fight. Now Poyo does an incredible job of just putting Reason in the full piece, but unfortunately he's third-partied by Sharam and Vidil ends up knocking him out. Peterbot makes a great play to fully armor box himself in to revive Poyo, but at this point they've been shot at for the entire game, they have no mats, no shield, and they still need to deal damage as they're below. So they're forced to launch pad and land into a box, and Peterbot is wiped out, and after a good attempt at 1v2ing, Poyo quickly follows. Now you need to have a good day 2 at the Global Championships as there's a 1.5 times point multiplier on the 2nd day, and worst of all for Peterbot and Poyo, this game was won by 2nd place team Queasy and Thomas, who are now rapidly approaching them on the leaderboards. Unfortunately for them, game 8 would be much of the same. They were able to get a little more early damage, but because they traded so much, Peterbot and Poyo were left with minimal heals in their inventory. Now knowing this isn't an inventory they can win the game with, they decided to go for the bunker, which again was free. Unfortunately from here, they got 0 medkits and 0 chug splashes and were deep in storm, so some pretty bad RNG. They were able to use some campfires and eventually found a single medkit, but it just wasn't enough. Poyo gets knocked in the storm and Peterbot accidentally armored walls him out, leaving him as a solo. He gets completely pushed by 2 teams and he puts up a good fight, but there are just too many people looking for him in the storm and he goes down in 36th, gaining 0 points. Now Peterbot and Poyo had gained a total of 6 points across the last 2 games, whereas Queasy and Thomas had gained 190 and had actually overtaken them in 1st place. At this point, they actually looked beatable and we had a tournament on our hands. So like every good team does, they adjusted their game plan when it wasn't working. In Game 9, they spent a lot more time looting and farming Surge off of Threats and Trashy, who were landing at the other side of the raft. Poyo also took a gold Monarch pistol rather than the burst he's been taking the whole tournament, and rotated far west to third-party Cheeps and Crisp, who were fighting Kiki and Kachoro for damage. Now with better loot and a much better zone, and more damage off spawn, they were able to leave the bunker both with gold Gatekeepers with drum mags. Now the Gatekeeper is an obnoxiously easy gun to use, held back by its 3 bullets in the magazine. However, with the drum mag, this now has 5, and this gun just becomes incredibly spammable, so combine this with the Emma Frost medallion in the endgame and Peterbot's insane fighting mechanics, and you have a recipe for solo clutch success.
The final fight here, Dukes, is excellent in these type of scenarios, but Peterbot is just a little better. Up top, the high ground hit is good, and he needs to go. And he does.
but solo clutching 2 wins is much more impressive. After a poor game 10 that isn't particularly relevant to the story because both Peterbot and Poyo and Queasy and Thomas did crap, Peterbot made the best solo clutch in Fortnite history ever. Now by sheer accident, Swizzy lands on Poyo's head at the beginning of the moving zones and knocks him out of the lobby. But importantly, with this death goes the Emma Frost medallion. So now it's down to Peterbot just to clutch up as a solo. Now I've made an entire video talking about why fast mechanics are not that important for competitive Fortnite. This video, ironically, was mainly focused around Thomas HD and his incredibly consistent playstyle, but watching Peterbot solo clutch in this endgame, I knew he was the exception to the rule. He makes a great fizz jump and lands on a low layer, cutting off Teeny, absolutely obliterating him in a matter of seconds. He does this so fast that Teeny doesn't even have a chance to pull out his shotgun. And this doesn't just happen to Teeny. Ritual gets absolutely obliterated in a matter of seconds, and it's only when he's able to get the loot from Rapid's body that he's able to pick up the medallion once again. Thomas from height makes a great play to drop down to the backside of the storm as the zone pulls back, so there shouldn't be anyone there, but Peterbot has made an even better play to wrap around to the side to sneak around the back, and he's able to wipe out Thomas. This game comes down to a tense 1v1 between Peterbot and Queasy, but when I saw this I know it wouldn't be that tense because I'm sorry Queasy, but I'm putting my money on Peterbot to win this every single time. Had Peterbot died at the same time as Poyo, Queasy and Thomas would have had a roughly 80-point lead, but Peterbot was able to solo clutch 112 additional points by himself. With 1 game left, Peterbot and Poyo had the lead by 37 points. Now with flashbacks to the FNCS Invitational in 2022, where Queasy and Vino decided to land on Cami and Seti to try and make a play to win the entire tournament, the same question was on everyone's minds. Will Queasy and Thomas finally be the first team to switch drops and contest Peterbot and Poyo at the raft? If they beat them off spawn, they can win the entire tournament. If not, they just have to hope that Peterbot and Poyo have a bad game and that they can clutch up the win in the final match. With 3rd place being so far behind Queasy and Thomas, it seems like a no-brainer that they should just land at the raft and fight them off spawn. Except it wasn't, and this was literally never going to happen. Despite the fact that Peterbot and Poyo would have more than likely won this off-spawn just due to them being a better off-spawn fighting team, and the fact that they know the drop spot infinitely better, there was one setting that actually completely ruined this: anonymous mode. For anyone unaware, anonymous mode hides your names in the Elim feed. Now this is mainly used for streamers to prevent them getting clipped and stream sniped.
It's them again, it's them. They've been stream sniping me all night.
But in high-level competitive matches where every game has the same 50 teams, players always turn this on. But for some reason at the Global Championships, this was forcibly off. If everyone has this setting off, you'll always know who drops around you. And if you see someone getting knocked in the Elim feed, who you know where they land and they're close to you, you know it's a free opportunity to push in and you can third party and either wipe the solo or try and finish up the team who's weak, who's just had the fight. So had Queasy and Thomas landed on Peterbot and Poyo, the other 2 teams landing at the raft would hear them and see them fight in the Elim feed and third party. So even if Queasy and Thomas beat Peterbot and Poyo off spawn, they more than likely would have just died and lost the tournament anyway. In a hilariously ironic way, anonymous mode potentially saved this tournament for Peterbot and Poyo in more than one way. Now in this final game, Queasy and Thomas did make the correct play to land at their regular drop spot and play out their game as normal. And everything seemed normal for Peterbot and Poyo too. However, when they're launch padding away to go to grab the forecast tower, like they did every game that it spawned, they saw in the Elim feed that the 2 teams contesting them were fighting and saw that threats got knocked. This is the first time this happened in 12 games, so they immediately turn back and fly straight towards the fight to third party. And with the Emma Frost medallion, they're easily able to find the knocked body for extra storm surge damage and finish off Trashy, who's left as a solo. Not only did the anonymous mode save them from getting contested, but it also earned them free storm surge, more loot, and free Elim points. But major props to Queasy and Thomas in this game. They really tried to play ultra aggressive and ultra confident, knowing they needed a big game in order to win. They made incredibly risky plays, using the river stick stashes to land on top of other teams' towers to try and get free refreshes and points. Now unfortunately, it didn't work twice, and they were knocked out of the tournament, guaranteeing Peterbot and Poyo the win. But a massive props to them for playing an incredibly consistent tournament, which the performance will just be overshadowed by Peterbot and Poyo. So with Queasy and Thomas dead, there was literally no way that Peterbot and Poyo could lose the tournament. They had already won. and they finished off in style by picking up a victory royale in the final game, which happened to be in Grimgate, where they won their first FNCS from. I know someone from Epic rigged this. I know it. With a win on LAN and 3 FNCS wins in a row, Peterbot truly proved the doubters wrong that he is not Cheaterbot, and he is in fact the Repeaterbot. Now the story is definitely focused a lot around Peterbot. He had probably the most insane tournament performance of all time, but we also have to give massive credit to Poyo for being an incredible teammate. On the surface, you could say he milked because he died twice, forcing Peterbot to clutch up as a solo twice. But looking at the elim list, he still was the second highest elims of any player across the entire tournament. It's just that Peterbot was so much higher than everyone else. It's funny that a team with 2 fighters usually just doesn't work, but Peterbot and Poyo aren't just fighters. They're incredibly hard workers who grinded every single tournament across the year, no matter what it was. Along with their coach, they took elements of every single strategy that worked from each season and combined them all with their scary reputation as the best fighters in the lobby to get the most powerful loot and mid-map objectives that others just couldn't even touch. And when it all went wrong, Peterbot just dunked on the whole lobby anyway. Oh yeah, and then he just dropped Poyo for trios. But if you want more detail on that Season 2 they dominated at Grimgate, click this video right here.